Just some current observations. It's all connected. The timeline analysis, which I do plan on doing more on the timeline analysis. But I could do this one getting ready for violin, actually. So, geez, where to begin? Marijuana conviction expunging. I guess that's a good place to start. There is a very good reason why marijuana convictions shouldn't be expunged. People who smoke marijuana are bad people. This is objectively true. For example, 2 girls, 1 bong. I've used them as a thumbnail before. They're proof that marijuana causes obesity. But if you Google, you know what sort of results come up? Shitting while fisting. Is that the kind of person you want to hire? Not the kind of person I'd want to hire. How has society gotten this bad? I'll tell you. Actually, I'm going to Google the definition of the word priming in psychology because I want to get it very specifically correct. Okay. Priming is the idea that exposure to one stimulus may influence a response to a subsequent stimulus. Without conscious guidance or intention, the priming effect refers to a positive or negative effect of rapidly presenting stimulus, blah, blah, blah. Right, so technique in which the introduction of one stimulus influences how people respond to a subsequent stimulus. Priming is also subversion. So what socially engineered the American population? Let's look at the 1960s. Now, a lot of things happened in the 1960s. That's when the priming through music and Hollywood began. You can still find movies, not just Cheech and Chong, but Easy Rider, right? Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, etc., etc. And so the question really that this addresses is why didn't Americans have a violent reaction against pornography and transgenderism, transgender clinics, pedophilia, right, child prostitution, etc., the way Nazi Germany did? Why wasn't the same reaction present? Priming. To their credit, there was a lot of very influential drug propaganda music. Priming. So normally you would instinctually oppose, morally, intellectually, etc. You would oppose things like drugs and pornography because you know it's going to corrupt a healthy society and turn it into the type of society where shitting while fisting is a culturally accepted norm. Downstream consequences of this right here. And I'm not blaming the baby boomers. I know a lot of people blame the boomers. So here you had a Vatican II, but you also had a shift in music. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Aaron Butterfly, the Beatles, and eventually, of course, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, etc., etc., etc. So that was very socially engineered, right? Janis Joplin, when she died, a heroin overdose, right? Did all kinds of heroin. Same with Hendrix and the rest of them. Yeah. Those are the people that influence our culture. People who died, I think, before the age of 30 with a needle in their arm. Really, America? But that was priming. That caused a shift in the instinct from opposing what you would normally oppose, instead you accept, like drugs and pornography. World War II and the media portrayal of World War II had a huge priming effect on the American population. Everybody was confused. It was a very confusing time. Nobody knew what was going on. The world could end tomorrow with the atom bomb. Right? Yeah. Priming. So priming here led to all this priming to here we are now. Sorry, I only get that way. Now, this is a very multifaceted and complicated thing, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't know why this is on my mind, but I bet that Joshua DeHaven's mom, who abandoned her family for methamphetamine, first smoked marijuana around 1968. I don't know why I think that, but I think that for some reason. 1968 specifically. And that led to mushrooms, acid, cocaine, and eventually methamphetamine. I don't know about the cocaine for sure, but most likely. I don't know about any of these things for sure, but my gut instinct, right? My calculating mind is telling me there is a significant likelihood to the accuracy of that hypothesis. So, had she been arrested for marijuana and convicted, this could have steered her away from the methamphetamine and prevented her kid from becoming a drug pusher that destroyed lives and families the same way his family was destroyed by marijuana, which led to the methamphetamine. That's why marijuana convictions are good. They have a positive impact on society. That's just one case, one example of billions at this point, globally and nationally. But there's much more factors than that, and here's where something else comes into play, right? How much accountability does the government have? My roommate, today, the past couple days, I make these observations a lot. I pointed out that there was a whole bunch of food remnants at the corner of the stove, and it was all from him. There's a bunch of bacon grease and bacon bits and Cheeto cheese, orange fire cheese, whatever. Clearly it was this man's mess. Like pig slop, right? That's my big joke about it. Now, I made him aware of this 2 days ago, and he still hasn't cleaned it. Like his brain just forgot. Today he forgot to turn the stove fan off. But he got really angry at me because I pointed out that he should brush his teeth. Maybe I'm being a dick about it, but his teeth are black because he doesn't brush. And I get him to chew tea tree toothpicks just because his breath stinks from very far away, like the smell of decaying teeth and gum line, etc. But it's not his fault. He is inbred. Now, I think his parents chose inbreeding over race mixing in the South in the 1960s or 70s, when he was born in the 60s, I think, but yeah. So, likely they were reactionary against the civil rights movement and things like that, and so they chose inbreeding over race mixing. So there's a whole lot to that timeline. It's not just as simple as drugs and sex. There was a whole lot of counter-revolution, I guarantee it, going on. While the rich elites were pushing this agenda, there was a lot of local resistance in different parts of the country. I guarantee it. Largely Christian would be my hypothesis for that. Well, when I started telling the roommate about brushing his teeth, he told me that the only time I'm happy is when I'm making others miserable, and I try to use logic to say, well, do you follow me around 24 hours a day, keeping track of when I'm happy? Are you in my head? How do you know what makes me happy or when I'm happy and when I'm not? Obviously he doesn't, but this just got him to dig in even further into lying to me and then pretending like he was a victim, and so I started mocking him for proposing that not letting him bullshit me is
persecution and abuse. Like I'm abusing him by not letting him lie to me about myself. Sorry. I should be professional. So, I'm pretty sure these are all signs of dementia. His dad had dementia. His dad died with dementia. So not only does he have a hereditary predisposition and a family history, I know those are the same thing, but in this case, I mean both the inbreeding and, just concentrated it more after his dad's generation into him. Like the more inbred you get down the line, the worse it gets, I'd imagine. But he still takes Klonopin here. The doctor told him not to. The doctors have all tried to get him to stop. He refuses to stop. He, stockpiles it, etc. And he tells me that it has a link to dementia. So this isn't judging him. I don't blame him for that. The Klonopin, if it causes dementia, that means it suppresses neurological functions. And his severe anxiety is a neurological function, an overfunction. Arguably, he needs to shut his brain down or he's suffering anxiety. So this is more to the point of, well, how can you expect the government to save this man from himself and his own decisions? Fascism, right? You're going to lock him up in some sort of institution where you can constantly 24 hours a day monitor his behavior and his medication for the rest of his life against his will, without his consent, with the use of force, including holding him down on a cold steel table and forcing needles in his arms, or slipping it in the food or something, of course. Would that really be a life worth living for him? Right, at what point do we draw government accountability to personal accountability? The government should be held accountable for its crimes, like Joe Biden with the expunging of the marijuana convictions. That's funny in itself. The most evil president in history who had to steal the election from a rat piece of shit like Donald Trump. Things are really bad when you had to steal the election from a piece of shit like Donald Trump, right? The guy who didn't want his VP to be white and male, so he insisted on a black woman instead of merit. It was gender and race, which was discrimination from the highest level of authority in the United States on the basis of gender and race, or ethnicity if you prefer. That guy, Joe Biden, in the 1980s, was against drugs. Now he's pushing marijuana reform. Because his son smokes crack? Is that it? Is this like how dumb America is? Is America just a large Jerry Springer show? The government is not just the audience, but also the guests. I'm dead serious. That is the result of all this priming, right? All this psychological manipulation, gearing of the masses. And that's what we learned from Edward Bernays, whose nephew is the CEO of Netflix, that the people cannot be trusted to run democracy responsibly. So they have to be controlled. They have to be mentally directed, geared towards certain goals, certain agendas, etc. Because if left to their own devices, they self-destruct every time. And he's largely right. I just wish that plutocracy would gear us in a more positive goal of sobriety and monogamy and morality, instead of actively and aggressively pushing against those things with drugs and pornography, etc.